Japanese lawmaker blasts Trump as mafia boss, sparks international showdown with White House in a bold and unexpected move. Japanese opposition lawmaker Shinji Aguma electrified the political world with a fiery speech on the floor of Japan's lower house. With steely conviction, Aguma branded U.S. President Donald Trump an extortionist, likening his tax strategies to those of a mafia boss. His accusations, aimed at what he described as coercive U.S. trade and tax policies, immediately ignited a media firestorm spanning continents. Major outlets, including CNN, Fox News, NHK, and the Asahi Shimbun, rushed to dissect Aguma's explosive remarks, propelling the speech into the heart of international controversy. Within hours, the tremors were felt in both Tokyo and Washington. Back in the White House, 27-year-old Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, the youngest in American history, watched the footage unfold with visible fury. A fierce defender of President Trump and rising MAGA star, Leavitt viewed Aguma's words not just as an insult to the administration, but as a personal affront. Determined to push back, she agreed to appear alongside Aguma on Global Dialogue, a high-stakes live broadcast co-hosted by NHK and CNN, airing from a gleaming Washington, D.C. studio. To Leavitt, this wasn't just a media appearance, it was a battle. A chance to defend the president's honor, assert her presence on the world stage, and reaffirm Trump's global vision before a captivated international audience. With unshakable poise, she prepared to confront the Japanese lawmaker head-on in a no-holds-barred debate that would draw global attention. Meanwhile, across the Pacific in Tokyo, the mood inside the lower house was charged with tension. Silence gripped the chamber as Aguma, lean and sharp-eyed, approached the podium. His voice rang low but firm, resonating through the room like a drumbeat of defiance. He accused the U.S. of using economic pressure tactics disguised as policy, arguing that Trump's tariffs were designed to squeeze Japan into unfair trade concessions. If we bow today, he'll come back for more, Aguma warned, his hands gripping the wooden lectern. This is not diplomacy, it's extortion. He didn't stop there. Aguma called Trump's foreign policy erratic, his trade decisions juvenile power games, and urged Japanese leadership, particularly Economy Minister Akazawa, to resist. Do not let our hospitality be mistaken for weakness, he declared, prompting audible murmurs from lawmakers and hesitant applause from the opposition bench. By the time he concluded his 15-minute tirade with a passionate appeal for Japan to preserve its economic sovereignty, the chamber had transformed into a political battlefield. News outlets swarmed the story. NHK, BBC, Reuters, and Bloomberg offered wall-to-wall analysis. The Japanese public was sharply divided. Some heralded Aguma as a patriot, others feared diplomatic fallout with Washington. In the U.S., talk shows lit up. Conservative pundits called Aguma ungrateful, while progressive circles debated the limits of American influence. Aguma, once a relatively obscure politician, had unwittingly thrust himself into the international spotlight. And the showdown was only beginning. As Global Dialogue began taping in D.C., the studio buzzed with anticipation. Diplomats, economists, and journalists filled the audience, sensing history in the making. The host, authoritative and crisp, introduced the participants. Joining us today are Mr. Shinji Aguma, the Japanese lawmaker whose remarks have sparked global debate, and Karoline Leavitt, press secretary to President Donald Trump. Turning to Aguma, he said, "Mr. Aguma, you've accused the U.S. president of economic strong-arming and called his tariffs a fatal blow to Japan. Let's begin there. What followed would be an unforgettable televised clash, East versus West, tradition versus boldness, nationalism versus global diplomacy. The atmosphere was electric on the set of Global Dialogue as Japanese lawmaker Shinji Aguma and U.S. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt faced off in a live televised showdown. The clash, which began as a response to Aguma's scathing critique of former President Donald Trump's tariff strategy, quickly turned into a high-stakes battle of facts, ideology, and global diplomacy. Aguma opened with emotional intensity, gripping the microphone as he warned that Trump's tariffs had harmed both Japanese industries and American consumers. Tariffs on our cars, electronics, even household goods, are nothing short of economic oppression, he declared. This undermines decades of alliance and cooperation. He pointed to a Sony factory in Nagoya that had laid off 10% of its workforce due to increased export costs. Japan is being punished for its economic success, he added. But Leavitt was ready. Calm, assertive, and razor-sharp, she fired back. Mr. Aguma, your rhetoric may be passionate, But economics demands evidence, she said coolly. She highlighted the 2019 U.S.-Japan trade agreement, noting a 40% boost in U.S. agricultural exports and the creation of 50,000 jobs. Tariffs aren't punishment, they're tools to address decades of imbalance. She went further. You cite layoffs at Sony, but are you aware the company expanded operations in Texas, creating 3,000 new jobs thanks to Trump's tax incentives? The studio audience murmured, impressed by her poise. Aguma tried to regain momentum. He argued that tariffs had caused Mazda vehicles to spike in price by 15%, resulting in a 20% sales drop at a California dealership. Trump doesn't care about allies, just deals, he snapped. But Leavitt didn't flinch. Mazda also built a $1.6 billion plant in Alabama, creating 4,000 jobs, she responded. That's not destruction. That's investment. She cited U.S. Department of Commerce data showing the trade deficit with Japan dropped to $55 billion in 2020, the lowest in a decade. Her voice rose with conviction. You say Trump disrespected Japan. Then why did your government sign a new trade deal with him? Or are you just trying to stir headlines? The audience erupted in applause. Aguma countered weakly, warning that supporting industries, like semiconductors, had also suffered. He claimed companies like Toshiba were forced to raise prices due to higher production costs. But again, Leavitt was armed with data. Toshiba partnered with Intel in Oregon, producing advanced chips, thanks to Trump's innovation incentives. Are you denying that benefit? She challenged. She continued, listing trade achievements. Japan cut its beef import tariffs from 38% to 9%. That's a win for both American farmers and Japanese consumers. Then came the knockout moment. Mr. Aguma, economics isn't a platform for grievances. If you dispute these figures, show us your data, she said, eyes locked on him. Aguma hesitated, repeating earlier points without fresh evidence. The studio grew restless. He clutched the microphone, his gaze flickering away from the crowd. The host interjected. Mr. Aguma, if you oppose current trade policy, what alternative do you propose? Aguma suggested that Japan diversify trade by shifting focus to Southeast Asia, reducing reliance on the U.S. Leavitt struck back immediately. Southeast Asia has promise, but the U.S. is still Japan's largest trade partner, accounting for 20% of your exports. Would you abandon an alliance that's created millions of jobs for your own people? Applause thundered through the studio once more. She added, in 2021, Japan's steel exports to the U.S. rose 12% after tariff renegotiations. That's not conflict. That's cooperation. Then she looked directly at him. You called Trump an oppressor. Can you name one country that got a better deal from Japan without applying pressure? Aguma struggled to respond. His earlier confidence seemed to wane. The segment was wrapping up, and it was clear Leavitt had not only defended Trump's policies but dominated the debate with facts, figures, and precision. Still, the host wasn't done. Mr. Aguma, you argue that Trump weakened the U.S.-Japan alliance. Please elaborate. Aguma tried to regroup. He claimed Trump had turned a strategic partnership into a financial transaction, pressuring Japan to increase military base funding. He demanded we double our contributions, he said. It was an insult to our national pride. A few Japanese audience members nodded quietly. Leavitt, fingers tapping the desk in thought, finally stood to deliver her final blow. Her voice rang clear as crystal. The tension in the Washington, D.C. studio was palpable as Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, stared down Japanese opposition lawmaker Shinji Aguma. What began as a policy discussion had evolved into a fierce ideological clash over the future of the U.S.-Japan alliance. Aguma had appealed to emotion, accusing former President Donald Trump of reducing the alliance to a transaction and humiliating Japan with financial demands. Alliances are built on respect, not threats, Aguma declared, citing Trump's push for Japan to increase its contributions to U.S. military bases, a demand he claimed strained Japan's budget and pride. But Leavitt, calm and composed, delivered a cutting rebuttal. Mr. Aguma, you speak of pride, but alliances are anchored in mutual commitments, not sentiment, she said, her voice unwavering. She cited the presence of U.S. military bases like Kadena and Okinawa, which play a critical role in deterring Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. When China expands militarized outposts in the Paracels, who sends patrol ships to ensure freedom of navigation? The United States, under President Trump. The audience, particularly American spectators, rose to their feet, erupting in applause. Pressing on, Leavitt added, You call Trump's demands unfair? Japan spends under 1.5% of its GDP on defense. The U.S. spends over 4% for your protection. Is that truly an equal partnership? The crowd murmured, visibly moved by the stark contrast. She pointed to Australia's increased defense spending under the Trump era as a sign of shared responsibility among allies. That's not coercion. That's what real alliances look like. Aguma tried to recover, arguing that Trump's blunt criticism hurt diplomatic ties. He referenced public remarks where Trump suggested Japan should pay more for U.S. troops stationed on its soil. Respect matters, Aguma insisted. These words damaged trust. But the studio was already shifting in Leavitt's favor. She struck again, citing the 2020 U.S.-Japan Space Cooperation Agreement, which allowed real-time satellite data sharing to monitor Chinese military movements. That's not domination. That's strategic trust. Trump didn't marginalize Japan. He empowered it to be a pillar of stability in Asia. Chants of Leavitt. Leavitt broke out in the crowd as she leaned forward, undeterred. Aguma, voice tense, tried another line of attack, arguing that U.S. financial demands hindered Japan's investment in advanced domestic defense tech, including missile systems. Leavitt didn't hesitate. You talk about radar? The U.S. helped Japan upgrade Aegis systems on Kongo-class destroyers to intercept North Korean missiles. That's not weakening the alliance, that's fortifying it. She continued, laying out hard evidence. In 2021, Trump greenlit joint U.S.-Japan training operations in Guam, enhancing real-time combat readiness. In the same year, steel exports from Japan to the U.S. rose 12% due to renegotiated tariffs. That's economic strength and military partnership, not dependence. Aguma tried to pivot, proposing that Japan deepen ties with India to reduce reliance on the U.S. Leavitt countered instantly. India is a valued ally. But when China threatens the Malacca Strait, who sends carriers to defend vital trade routes? The United States, not India. Applause thundered through the studio once more. She wasn't finished. In 2022, Trump initiated joint development of anti-missile laser technology. The U.S. also supported Japan's entry into an expanded Five Eyes intelligence network. That's not pressure, it's deep-rooted cooperation. She turned to Aguma with a challenge. If Trump weakened the alliance, why did Japan agree to co-develop unmanned submarines with us? Can you answer that? The American audience erupted with cheers, many standing and applauding. Aguma pushed back weakly, arguing that pressure to purchase U.S. military equipment, like Patriot missile systems, hampered Japan's own tech innovation. But Leavitt's response was swift and surgical. Japan integrated Patriot systems to reduce vulnerability to Chinese missiles. That's not dependence, it's defense. And Trump didn't demand it, he offered real solutions. She concluded, Mr. Aguma, the U.S.-Japan alliance is the cornerstone of peace in the Indo-Pacific. Trump didn't erode it. He modernized it from Aegis destroyers to global hawk drones. Your narrative isn't built on facts, it's built on grievances. Then came the final strike, with a tone Gen Z viewers would recognize and appreciate. Mr. Aguma, alliances aren't therapy sessions for airing complaints. If you want to criticize, bring data, not sad stories. The audience exploded with applause and cheers, American voices drowning out faint Japanese murmurs. Under the bright studio lights, Aguma sat stiffly, sweat collecting on his brow, his grip tightening on the table. Across from him, Leavitt radiated calm authority, her eyes burning with the fire of a seasoned warrior who knew she had landed the final blow. As the host prepared to transition to the next segment, he turned to Aguma once more. You've claimed Trump has boxed Japan into a difficult regional position, forcing it to seek alternatives. Could you elaborate? Aguma tried to salvage his argument. Trump's America First agenda stripped Japan of its regional leadership. His anti-China stance forced us into confrontation and harmed reconciliation with Beijing. Leavitt tilted her head, studying him. Mr. Aguma, she said clearly, Japan isn't a victim, it's a force. And Trump didn't isolate it. He gave Japan the strength to lead. As the debate stormed into its most intense round yet, Karoline Leavitt wasn't just defending Trump. She was rewriting the narrative of U.S.-Japan leadership in Asia. Japan led the comprehensive and progressive agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership after the U.S. exited the original TPP, Leavitt stated firmly. Trump didn't sideline Japan, he empowered it to lead. Her words sliced through the silence like a blade. She then turned to Aguma, eyes narrowed. You talk of working with China, But when Beijing built 20 illegal military outposts in the South China Sea, who ensured freedom of navigation? The United States. A hush fell over the crowd, followed by whispers of acknowledgement. Leavitt wasn't done. Trump backed Japan's regional clout with real support. Over $2 billion for Southeast Asian port development projects to counter China's Belt and Road strategy. Aguma, flushed and visibly rattled, tried to pivot. Trump made Japan-South Korea reconciliation harder, he argued, pointing to the 2019 semiconductor trade dispute that Trump didn't mediate. Japan needs autonomy, not to be dragged into confrontations. Leavitt didn't flinch. Trump didn't drag Japan anywhere. He gave it the platform to lead, she said, referencing the 2023 U.S. Japan-South Korea summit where Japan helped spearhead trilateral cybersecurity cooperation. Japan isn't trapped. It's driving the Asia-Pacific agenda through forums like APEC. Thunderous applause erupted. Aguma's tone grew shaky. He referenced increased Chinese naval activity near the Senkaku Islands and rising fear among Japanese fishermen. Our joint patrols have provoked China. We're risking conflict, he said, hoping to draw sympathy. But Leavitt struck swiftly. You're worried about Senkaku? Trump reinforced the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty and made it crystal clear America will defend Japan. Do you want Japan to face China alone? The audience responded with another wave of cheers. Leavitt continued, citing Trump's support for Japan's $1.5 billion solar project investments in Thailand and co-leadership on climate policy at the 2023 G7. You claimed Japan's position was diminished? Then tell me, what major Asian initiative has Japan been excluded from? Aguma had no answer. His eyes dropped for a brief moment, his hand subconsciously rubbing his chin. When asked what Japan should do to elevate its regional role, Aguma proposed forming a new Asian alliance, one free from U.S. dependency. Leavitt's response was lightning fast. An independent Asian alliance? When China threatens the Taiwan Strait, who provides Japan with satellite intel? The U.S., not a theoretical alliance. Applause roared once again. She followed up with fresh evidence. In 2023, Japan co-hosted the G7, taking charge on regional climate leadership with full U.S. support. The U.S. also backed Japan's 5G infrastructure expansion in the Philippines to counter Huawei. If Trump hindered Japan, why is Japan leading the Asian Green Development Fund? Aguma tried again. Trump pressured us to increase military spending, cutting aid budgets. We had to reduce educational funding in Cambodia, he said. Leavitt's response cut to the core. You mention education? In 2022, Trump supported Japan's JDS technical training program in Laos, training over 3,000 specialists. That's not pressure, that's partnership. She delivered her final blow with commanding clarity. Japan doesn't need permission to shine. Trump didn't silence Japan, he gave it a megaphone. The only question left is, are you willing to lead? The crowd went wild. As the host prepared to shift to the final topic, the studio simmered with anticipation. Analysts, diplomats, and citizens sat riveted. Shinji Aguma leaned stiffly forward, his hands clenched, the pressure visible. Across from him, Karoline Leavitt exuded calm fire, ready to end the debate on her terms. Then came the final question. Mr. Aguma, earlier you called President Trump an extortionist and unfit to lead. Please clarify your position. Aguma inhaled deeply, his voice straining for control. Trump lacks the ethics and diplomacy of a global leader, he declared. His legal issues, including a New York tax fraud case, have damaged America's global credibility and Japan's trust. Leadership requires integrity, not chaos. Leavitt tilted her head, her expression both analytical and unbothered. Mr. Aguma, she said, her voice sharp and deliberate, you want to talk about leadership? Trump is a man of action, not sound bites. She cited the Abraham Accords, where Trump brokered historic peace between Israel and several Arab nations, something no other leader had accomplished in decades. That's real leadership. That's delivering where others only talked. As murmurs grew in the audience, she went for the jugular. You mentioned a lawsuit. It's still in litigation. But tell me, do you have a single piece of evidence showing it affected foreign policy? Or is this just a smear tactic? The studio fell silent for a beat. Leavitt kept going. Under Trump, unemployment hit a historic low of 3.5% before the pandemic, including record job growth for Asian American communities. That's how you judge leadership, by impact, not headlines. Aguma tried to recover, citing Trump's blunt language at the 2018 G7. where he called other leaders weak, something that, in Aguma's words, offended Japan. Leavitt didn't back down. Trump speaks plainly. That's not weakness, it's strength. Allies always know where he stands. And it's that clarity that reshaped global alliances and revitalized Japan's strategic role. In the final chapter of a dramatic series of debates, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt delivered a performance that left no doubt. She came prepared, poised, and packed with facts. Facing off against Japanese lawmaker Shinji Aguma, she dismantled his claims piece by piece with a combination of data, diplomacy, and determination. Leavitt opened her final arguments by citing one of Trump's underappreciated international wins, reforming the World Health Organization in 2020. Under Trump's leadership, G7 nations increased transparency and funding during the pandemic, she stated. Japan alone received $200 million in targeted health aid as a result. The audience erupted in applause. Aguma, visibly tense, pushed back. He argued that Trump's unpredictable behavior, especially his threats to withdraw troops from South Korea, had caused allies like Japan to doubt America's reliability. Leavitt's tone sharpened. Concerned about commitment, she shot back. In 2021, Trump bolstered U.S. naval presence in the Western Pacific with the deployment of the USS Ronald Reagan. That wasn't a retreat. It was a clear signal to Beijing. She went on to highlight Trump's launch of the Global Supply Chain Alliance, a strategy to reduce Japan's dependence on Chinese semiconductors, boosting tech security and strategic independence. You call that chaos? She challenged Aguma. Name one leader who brought more long-term stability to Japan's position in the region. The host leaned in. Mr. Aguma, what do you expect from a global leader? Aguma answered that true leadership required humility and cooperation, not confrontation. Leavitt's response was immediate. When China blocked rare earth exports to Japan in 2019, Trump stepped in to help Japan secure alternative supplies through Australia. That's real cooperation backed by action, not talk. The audience stood cheering, some shouting her name. Leavitt then cited further examples. In 2019, Trump led the Global Security Summit, urging Japan to join international efforts against cybercrime. In Tokyo, the U.S. helped establish a national AI research center to elevate Japan's tech capabilities. If Trump is so unreliable, why is Japan still a central U.S. partner in all these initiatives, she asked. Aguma, searching for ground, argued that Trump's personal scandals hurt America's image, making it harder for allies like Japan to trust U.S. leadership. He referenced alleged misconduct from Trump's 2016 campaign. Leavitt replied with force. Scandals don't build economies. Results do. She cited the 2021 U.S. post-pandemic recovery under Trump, achieving 4.2% GDP growth. That growth helped Japanese exports thrive, she emphasized. Leadership isn't about playing a flawless role. It's about moving the world forward. Mr. Aguma, she added firmly, Trump isn't an actor. He's a results-driven leader. What do you have to compare? Aguma's composure wavered. His once fiery tone dulled. Hands twisting a pen, he seemed unable to recover. As the final segment closed, the tension in the studio reached its peak. The crowd was electrified, breathless. On one side, Aguma sat slouched, his gaze lowered. On the other, Karoline Leavitt sat upright, smiling with quiet confidence, like a general who had just won a war without firing a shot. The host stepped forward. Let's give both participants a round of applause. The audience rose in thunderous cheers. Who's the winner in your eyes? He asked. Leavitt. Leavitt. They roared. Aguma lowered his head, avoiding eye contact. Leavitt rose gracefully, bowed to the audience, and said warmly, This isn't just my win. It's a victory for truth and for the U.S.-Japan alliance. Aguma stood slowly. He shook her hand with a stiff smile. You did well, he muttered. Thank you, she replied, her tone sincere. This was a debate worth having. As the stage lights dimmed and the audience filed out, conversations buzzed in every direction. Reporters immediately swarmed Leavitt at the exit. Karoline, how did you prepare to dominate like that? One asked. She smiled. I trusted in the truth and in President Trump's record. Social media lit up within hours. The hashtag Leavitt versus Aguma trended globally. One viral post read, Karoline Leavitt turned Aguma into a bystander. She brought a data arsenal to a moral debate. Another declared, she didn't just win. She redefined what political debate looks like. Even some of Aguma's supporters acknowledged the imbalance. One Japanese commenter wrote, Aguma represented us, But Leavitt was a force. We must learn to debate like her. Memes flew fast. Screenshots of Leavitt with captions like, "When you bring receipts, not regrets," or "She didn't flinch once." Another viral reel highlighted her closing line, "Leadership isn't about perfection. It's about delivering results." CNN reported, White House press secretary overwhelms Japanese lawmaker in landmark debate. The BBC offered a more neutral take. Leavitt-Aguma clash reveals stylistic divide, facts versus emotion. Japanese media was more introspective. The Asahi Shimbun admitted Aguma struggled under pressure. NHK reported he raised valid concerns but was outmatched by Leavitt's precision. Fuji TV analysts praised her as bold, modern, and surgically effective. Backstage, Leavitt's team celebrated the victory. One aide told reporters she had studied every line of Trump's trade, defense, and diplomatic policies for weeks. On Fox News, Leavitt gave a short interview. "I just wanted to show the world what Trump did for America and our allies. Truth is the strongest weapon." Aguma declined interviews, issuing a short statement. "I shared Japan's views." The debate was a chance to be heard. But for many watching around the world, the verdict was already in. Karoline Leavitt didn't just debate. She dominated. And in doing so, she gave the U.S.-Japan alliance a voice that echoed far beyond the studio. As the final words of the debate echoed through the studio, all eyes were on Karoline Leavitt. Her victory wasn't just about dominating a political opponent. It was about redefining what leadership looks like in the modern age. Analysts at Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal praised her not just for the win, but for the way she won, sharp, confident, and unshakably prepared. They hailed her as a rising star in American politics, forecasting an even larger role on the national and global stage. Though defeated, Shinji Aguma was still respected by many in Japan for his courage to challenge a formidable opponent on U.S. soil. But the narrative belonged to Leavitt. Her performance proved that facts, when delivered with passion and clarity, can still lead the global conversation. The debate's energy lingered long after the cameras stopped. Across media and social platforms, clips of Leavitt's responses and powerful comebacks flooded timelines. The world wasn't just watching her speak. They were watching a new political era being born. Leavitt stood out as more than a spokesperson. She became an icon for a generation. Her mastery of data, combined with the ability to craft it into a compelling narrative, marked her as a new archetype, not just polished, but purposeful. A generational voice emerges for Gen Z. Leavitt was a breath of fresh air. At universities like Stanford and Yale, her debate was analyzed in classrooms. Students hosted workshops to study her strategy, how she combined facts with emotional intelligence, transforming cold policy into a human story. "She made me believe that truth still matters," one Stanford student said, "and that youth can lead from the front." She soon became a sought-after speaker, drawing thousands to events in cities like Boston and Seattle. Youth leadership groups across the U.S. and Asia invited her to share insights on turning belief into action. Her style, direct, data-rich, yet accessible, set a new bar for aspiring leaders. Elevating the art of debate from Tokyo to Brussels, her approach was studied by diplomats and young politicians alike. Karoline Leavitt's debate wasn't just a win, it was a milestone. A Tokyo University scholar put it best: she turned spreadsheets into stories of partnership. She made the U.S.-Japan alliance feel alive and real. Her defense of Trump's policies and Japan's growing regional role became case studies in international relations courses. Nikkei Asia remarked, "Leavitt didn't just argue. She showed what persistence, preparation, and clarity can achieve." Her performance reignited respect for fact-based persuasion in an age dominated by spin and soundbites. International conferences cited her as a pioneer of a new debate standard, where numbers meet heart and conviction meets composure. Beyond politics, a cultural blueprint, but Leavitt's influence stretched further. In a society often torn by polarization and emotional rhetoric, she reminded audiences of the timeless value of preparation. She showed that success in debate, or in life, doesn't come from shouting louder, but from knowing more and saying it better. Her message to the next generation was clear: don't just argue, prepare. Don't just speak, persuade. She emphasized unity through shared interests, using the U.S.-Japan alliance as a symbol of mutual trust rather than just geopolitical strategy. Her voice became a rallying cry not just for political reform, but for civic empowerment. A legacy beyond the stage. Karoline Leavitt's journey, from debate stage to international acclaim, was more than a political performance. It was a reflection of the values the world is hungry to see: integrity, clarity, and truth-driven dialogue. In today's America, where public debates are often hijacked by misinformation or emotional appeals, Leavitt's story offers a blueprint. Whether you're discussing politics, negotiating at work, or engaging in your community, her example proves the power of blending substance with story. The takeaway? Practice listening. Research deeply. Speak with conviction. And above all, turn your knowledge into narratives that unite people, not divide them. Karoline Leavitt didn't just win a debate. She reignited belief in how truth, told well, can move the world. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like Leavitt's journey, where preparation meets purpose and one voice can change everything. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next story.